it plays a role in your MBA application. So now that you've been considering an MBA, what happens when your GMAT score doesn't quite make it to the highest mark? What happens when it's a little bit lower? This is what we're going to be discussing today. And by the end, I'm going to be giving you some hacks for how to make the most out of your application so that you stand out to the MBA admissions team. All right. So yeah, is your GMAT score the elephant in the room? Let's talk about it. So again, we're going to be talking about how to get into a B school with a lower GMAT score. And that elephant in the room, a low GMAT score, it could really feel like it's not going to happen. That you're like, oh, I'm changing my school list. I'm not going to be, applying to the top schools that I've always wanted to go to because I just can't get in. Well, guess what? These schools, they are going to have a holistic review process. And we'll dive into that. You guys, as we're talking today, please, use the chat so that I can answer your questions as we go along. But yeah, we'll start diving in here. So this holistic review process, I would say that it's true. It's real right now. Admissions committees are opening up your application and reviewing them, whether it's them or a reader, somebody is reviewing your application, and they don't just throw away applications that don't meet a certain threshold with GMAT. So know that your application will be reviewed, and they're going to be looking at different parts of your application, including your work experience, what you've done inside or outside the classroom before you graduated from college or afterwards. They're going to be looking at the content of your essays to try to make sure they know who you are and that you're a good fit for them. They're going to want those recommendation letters to be backing up what you're saying on a normal basis. And they really want to know that they're the right fit for you in multiple ways, their personality as well as getting you to that next level of getting a job when you graduate. So we'll talk about this and how many, we'll talk about all these little parts and what you can do to really emphasize who you are so that the school sees you for you and maybe forgives maybe a little bit lower GMAT score. Okay, so I see a lot of people who are in the chat that are asking about a specific score. So the next thing we're going to talk about right here, this is the average GMAT score for top MBA programs across the globe. Now, you can see this range in, so I know we are still in this duplicital universe where we're using the old GMAT score and the new GMAT score. So we've tried to include it here so you can kind of get a perspective on this. But, these are the GMAT scores that are the average. And, they take a range. So you can look at this range here and say like, okay, so I fall within range. But if I have a 515, Jen, am I going to get in? Let's see what you have to share with them to be that exception to the rule. All right, so understanding what it means to have a low GMAT or GRE score. And so generally that's going to be outside of the average by about 30 points. And so in old GMAT terms, that's like 700 or below for most top MBA programs. And then for new GMAT, that's like 645 or below. And then when we talk about GRE, so somebody asked me about GRE scores. Chirag, you said, what about these GRE scores and Indian B schools? I don't have them on my list, but we can always come back and visit that a little bit later. But for most MBA programs, a lot of the times in the top, they're close to that 160 in the quant and the verbal section. So when does it hurt you to have a low GMAT score? It's the most impactful in a negative way when you don't have other strong components of your application. And if you seem to just ignore it, right? Like if you're just like, oh, you take a holistic approach, I don't have to worry about this. Well, you kind of do. You need to kind of sell the committee on the prospect of your success, not only in the classroom, but post MBA. So yeah, you do kind of have to do a little bit of work to make sure that the school feels confident in you and your readiness for the program. So when does it matter less? About the opposite, right? Like when you have these other moments in your resume, your experience, or life that really stand out to them. They're like, wow, we're not going to have anybody else in our classroom who has ever experienced this, or this is a really different perspective that we think that it could really help enhance the classroom experience for our client, or for not our clients, but for your cohort or your students. So that's what I would say. They would also be happy to see you have quant and verbal skills in a different side. Sometimes I've had people who have experience in investment banking, finance, really heavy quant materials, or like they're even a data analyst, but they're just GRE or GMAT score doesn't match. And the school can infer from what you've been doing on a daily basis if you have those skills that they need to be able to be successful in the program. And that's really, especially these days, because data analytics is core. That's part of every MBA program. AI, that's going to be part of every MBA program from here. So they want to make sure you have a solid understanding before you go in. And then there's some schools that are now waiving the GMAT or GRE. I say now, but they've been doing it for about 5 years. So maybe it's not so new, but there are some that don't require it or offer a waiver. And so that's when your score obviously doesn't matter too much. And this is what I would say. If a school is offering a GMAT waiver or GRE waiver, and your score is a good bit below their average, don't submit it. Then let them ask you for it. Because once you submit it, it's official. It's in your record. They have to report it for all intents and purposes, essentially for the rankings. So don't submit it. If when in doubt, don't send it. Ask a professional before. Okay. All right. So here's strategy or hack number 1 for you. So how do you prove that you're ready for that MBA program quantitatively, or on the verbal side? Let's be honest, it's really the quant that they're most worried about. English proficiency, your essays, that'll all kind of prove to them your kind of verbal side of things. Maybe analytical will be important here too, but they may want to see your performance from work, right? Like if you're doing heavy quant work on a daily basis, make sure that your resume bullet points are going to reference that. I would maybe even take some examples for your essay to show it. And like when we were going over the data said one thing, but my boss said the other, or my gut said the other. And we went through this analytical blah, 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 and came out with this really great outcome, or we failed. That's another great part about MBA programs, is they're not afraid of failure. They encourage it. They want to see that you've tried something new. So tell them about those endeavors. Was there a moment where not having the highest, quant background held you back and you took a class or something like that to be able to kind of help you be better? So again, these classes that you can take specifically for MBA would be, they want to see statistics, accounting, finance. They want to see those types of classes that you've taken. Either you can take them at a community college. There's no worry about kind of like where you take it. Like that part's not as important as the grade that you get. And there's like believe it's UC Berkeley Extension online. There's a lot of other schools that are offering these classes online. You could do the HBX CORe. You could do your university courses, MBA Math. But again, we're going back to these scores. They want to be able to see that you have, high GPA, high grades in these courses. Other ways to show this, man, CFA, PMP, your CFA or CPA or your chartered accountancy, all of that really counts as well. Like, because you have to take the classes, there's all these little things that you have to do to check this box. It really does, beyond just the quantitative side of things, it is also showing your dedication, right? Like, you've got this experience, you know you want to do it, you've worked hard towards it. There's no doubt that you're going to do the same when you get in the MBA class room as well. Okay. So that last bullet point about quantifying your impact, you're demonstrating those quantitative skills in general, but then also you're showing them how you have been able to use quant to be able to make something happen in the workplace. All right. The next thing that we're going to talk about is your compelling narrative, right? Like, these essays, they need to show who you are and your unique story that you have to share with your admissions committee. And so they want to, like it says here, authenticity and self-awareness are key. They want to make sure that they're the right school for you. So not only are they your number one choice, but they're also, you are their number one choice, right? Like a little bit of reciprocity there. So you'll want to make sure that you've talked to people, that you can reference different students you've got to meet along the way, and how you know that this is the right fit. So is there a class? Is there an organization, an event that happens that you're like, yeah, this is why Columbia is number one for me, and it's the right fit for my next step in my career. And then, right, like these exceptions to the rule with a lower GMAT, they are these moments where you show you're exceptional in different ways. So it could be your leadership, and it can be in the boardroom or in your team or entrepreneurship. I've seen some really cool people that have really thought outside the box as far as what they've been doing, and started their own business because of something that was lacking potentially in their current job, that they saw a hole in the market, and this is how they got their whole start. So if you can show that and showcase it, that's what they're going to be really excited about. And then the optional essay. So again, this is a moment, like, let's say that I don't think that anybody needs to write a sob story about I'm really bad at tests and I don't think that you always have to do that, right? I think that what you should do is say, while my readiness is not exactly shown on my exam, I am exhibiting this on a daily basis at work or through the coursework that I've done, knowing about this gap that I have, right? And so they want to know not necessarily about so much about this backstory, but more about, okay, something happened. What did you do about it? And what did you learn from it? And how have you been better since then? So we'll always kind of be thinking about that. All right, Big Mike, you want to know, is Yale a top school? And do they admit low test scores? So Yale is this really interesting anomaly, right? Like, it is a top school, and man, we should have a whole presentation on rankings. But because of rankings, sometimes they get ranked lower because they do believe in that exception to the rule of admitting people with lower scores, or maybe not the highest or well-known employers, because they're really focused on finding the right fit, because they really want someone who fits with Yale's personality. When you look at their application, they're really going into the dean and what their philosophy is, and what's your philosophy, what it guides you, your principles, those types of things. So in my mind, and I actually saw Poets and Quants did a little thing about this, about who would be, if there was an M8 instead of an M7, Yale would be a contender for that M8 side of it, even though it might fall a little bit lower on the rankings. But I absolutely, if you are interested in the intersection of making an impact and being able to bring business together, and you have a bit of an altruistic drive, I think Yale is right up there. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is how you can stand out with your work experience. So if you have either been promoted ahead of schedule or had normal promotions, this is important to share with them. You're showing them your eagerness, your preparedness, like you've got a lot of things with all the ness going on there. And so you're showing them who you are and how you are a high achiever. And so by diving in and giving them that consistent growth is going to be really important. So a lot of the times, I mean, like today, I talked to 2 different people with 2 years of work experience, and they're like, am I qualified for an MBA? Should I do this? Should I not? I'm like, okay, so let's look at this equation. Like, tell me about your work experience so far. What's the breadth and depth? Like, have you been able to, meet everybody from different departments, understand what they do and how everything functions together? One of these fellows, he was a consultant. And so with that being said, yeah, he knows how all these things function and work together. A little bit different if you're a software engineer and you've been working for 2 years in a cubicle. Maybe you got promoted to software engineer 2, but what else have you taken on? So I would say, if you have promotions, absolutely share it. If you don't have promotions, you want to talk about this other side of taking on new projects, expanding your role, new clients, maybe even taking on kind of like the extracurriculars at work and joining some of those additional teams like activities or CSR or community service outreach. Those are things that they're going to want to see. And then you have all this. Now you need to be able to show them the impact that you've made through these results, right? So what did this yield? An increase in engagement of employees by 30% year over year, or increase in budget, bottom line, how much money revenue you brought in, how much money you saved, whatever it might be, you want to put it in there. And then again, have you been able to move the needle, whether that's within your group or your organization, or not just, we're not just talking about professional. We can talk about personal. So a lot of people are involved in a specific group or club or activity, passion project, whatever it might be. You have leadership there, definitely use it. You want to be able to share that so that they can see what you're bringing to the table beyond academics. All right. So 3GP, you want to know about low test score for deferred application, how to approach. Okay, so for deferred applications, if we break it down into these parts that an MBA committee is looking at and balancing, it's a balancing act for them. They need to balance out your academic readiness, your exam scores. So, they're looking at your GPA, exam scores, your work experience, your leadership, and fit, right? Like, these are all the little things that they're looking at through this lens of admissions. And for a deferred MBA, they have a little less information on you. And you just haven't had that chance to really prove yourself yet because it's a deferred MBA. That's okay. They really do look for higher GMAT GRE scores as part of this process. It is ultra competitive. I've seen people with lower, like closer to average GMAT GRE scores get into the deferred programs, but usually they are looking for above average for deferred MBA because they need a guarantee one way or another that you're a good bet, because you're going to bring up their rankings for high GMAT GRE score, GPA, or you have like blown it out of the park with your leadership. Like you really have to have something exceptional there. So you want to be able to kind of counterbalance that. If you have a lower GRE or GMAT score, think about retaking it. I mean, for deferred MBAs, you kind of almost have until April to submit your application. So, if you submit it in, in the fall, they're kind of like, why didn't you take the time to work on this? And the alternative to this is you could take the GRE instead of the GMAT. There's some options out there for you. Okay, so PP wants to know about, based on your experience, in what occasion would the AdCom ask the candidate to retake the GMAT, low GMAT score, or could it be something else? So typically they're only going to ask you to retake the GMAT if it's low. They're not going to be like, oh, your GPA is really low, but your GMAT's okay, retake the GMAT. And for the most part, they're never going to go straight out and ask you to retake the GMAT. What they're going to do is they're going to waitlist you. And again, that's a whole nother topic to talk about. But they're going to waitlist you and have you do a self-assessment of where you are compared to the class profile. And with that, like if it is the GMAT score, GRE score, like you can take the opposite test. That's one way. You could take the GMAT math. You could do the HBS score. That's a bit longer. You could take the accounting finance courses, whatever it might be. They're not going to ask you outright to take the GMAT or GRE unless you're in a personal conversation. Otherwise, they're going to just use this generic line of, well, we can't really give specific feedback, but if you take a look at our class profile and compare it and see where maybe you lack a little bit and compared to other students, this is a great way for you to figure out what we need. They want you to retake the exam. And even retaking it and getting the same score is not that bad. One, you're showing that you are committed to them, to doing what they need you to do to get there. So I wouldn't take it as like, oh man, I got a 700 or a 645 again. Like, I think it's like going through the process just for them can be enough to move the needle for them to say a little bit lower GMAT, but we know that they're going to come. So that's helpful for them. Afla says, is it better to pursue an MBA from top unis from USA or EU? Whew, that's a loaded question these days, right? So with which school do you want to go to? I think it always boils down to geography. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to start your career post MBA? If you want to be in the US, absolutely, that's where you should study. If you want to be in Europe, UK, then go for that. As far as environment, if you are concerned, then maybe it is safer to consider alternatives. Maybe it's safer to plan on a backup school. There's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're looking at US versus European schools at this point in time. My prediction is that there's going to be less people applying to US schools this fall, especially in round one, with it still being all up in the air and not being able to see who was able to make it to the class and start their MBA this fall. And because, application deadlines are in September. So they won't have enough to make a decision on, and they're going to apply to the other schools during round one. And then maybe we'll see the inverse happen in round two. So that's my thought. But geography is really the most important part. What kind of job do you want? Where do you want it to be? And then are those jobs available in that geography? That's your biggest thing. Is it better to take MBA directly after a 3-year degree or get some work experience? If so, how many years of a gap after bachelor's? Is 2 years? Okay, so I know we're kind of like doing a little bit of rabbit hole here. So really quickly, 2 years versus 3 years, 4 years out of your bachelor's degree. The big difference is what you've been able to experience and accomplish between graduation and that point. So if within 2 years of your graduation, you've been consulting and working with clients and being able to make deliverables based on the bottom line and having projects that go across different parts of the business, accounting, finance, supply chain, etc., and you have a good understanding of the entire business landscape, then you could be a strong candidate with only 2 years of work experience. But if you haven't gotten a lot of experience or exposure and you don't have promotions, then maybe that's your cue to wait another year. I wouldn't wait too long, right? Like there is a point where you become too experienced for a traditional full-time MBA program, and you kind of teeter on like going to senior MBAs or executive MBAs, and that's closer to 8 years. All right. Okay, so next, let's talk about well-roundedness and your fit. Okay, so the way that they're looking at this is when you get on campus, are you just going to go to class, do your thing, and then leave? Not very many people applying to an MBA program are going to do that, right? There are a few, let's be honest, but they want to know how you fit in with the landscape. Are you going to participate in different clubs and activities? And there might not be a direct parallel between what you do extracurricularly right now and what they have there, but they can take some inference of, okay, so you like to be involved, take leadership, and you're open to new things, right? Like that's something that they can kind of get from a resume. And so you want to make sure you're including that. I've seen a lot of resumes lately that have a skills section, but no extracurriculars. And it's like skills, those are part of your application form. It's the extracurriculars that are going to give them a bit more of an edge in making that decision. So they want to see what you've been doing outside the classroom, what leadership you've taken. And those can be hobbies too, right? I just talked to a guy who was like, I don't have a lot of extracurriculars. I really like to hike, and I've done trekking, like up some different really high peaks in the Himalayas and in Indonesia, like those types of things. And I was like, did you do that as a group? Yes. Fantastic. Let's use that, right? Let's talk about this leadership that you had in the group, maybe when nobody's defined as a leader, and talk about how you helped the group of 15 people get up the mountain. And how do you put that on a resume? You say like group trekking helped, group of 15 up Mount Everest. I mean, probably not up Mount Everest all the way, but the beginning part of it. I can't remember what that's called. Anybody else wants to chime in on what I'm trying to say? You can help. But right, like you were doing something. You helped your group get to Machu Picchu, whatever it might be. That can work. They want to see about your networking, right? Like, so not only how are you going to get involved with your cohort, but like how are you going to get involved with alumni, and how are you going to get involved in the different parts of the MBA? Are you going to be able to mix and mingle with recruiters? Because sometimes they'll come for 3 days on campus, and the first day is an information session, the second day is first round interviews, second day is callbacks, right? So they want to know that you're going to be able to hang and socialize at that level with your cohort and the recruiters and an alumni. FA, would coming from underrepresented background offset the GPA, and by how much? So interesting question. And I would say that a lot more information or data has been posted by GMAT, the people that run the GMAT. And you can kind of look up these statistics and look at the average GMAT score per location. And there is a statistical anomaly in South America and some parts of Africa, and like sub-Saharan Africa particularly. And they know, the MBA programs know that these candidates are well-rounded, amazing, qualified candidates, but because of the way that the testing is conducted and the way that they learn, the testing is not matching how they're used to being tested, etc. So they do see that anomaly that they can be out of that score range. So, FA, I have no idea where you're from, but you could fall into that in general. Beyond that, being underrepresented can definitely help. In a time where DEI for the U.S. schools is on the lower side of visibility, what I'll say is, how do you tell the committee you're underrepresented? So sometimes that could just purely be location. The other parts of it is, how involved are you in your underrepresented community, right? So if you're Hispanic or Latinx or African American, what clubs and activities have you done to help with your specific community? Have you been involved in those types of clubs and helping each other go? And if not, there are ways to subtly put one little sentence somewhere. Coming from a Hispanic background, family is really important to me. Coming from Nigeria, giving back to Africa is really important to me, right? So you can insert this little bit about you, and it takes coming from whatever this underrepresented thing is, first generation, whatever it is, you can put it into your essay really easy if you don't feel like it's well represented on your resume and something that they can get at first glance. Okay. All right. AFLA, would low academic GPA be an issue? Can GMAT help these situations? Yeah, I would say usually if you have a lower GPA, you want to use the exam to offset that and usually be at or above an average GMAT GRE score. I know that's really difficult, but if you understand something, or like you have an understanding of why you have a low GPA and why you maybe have a low GMAT or GRE, I think that's when you use the optional essay to say, I found out that I have a disability and I wasn't able to test well while I was in college. I've learned about this and I, applied for the exception with the GMAT or like for accommodations. And while I was able to get them, I wasn't able to perform at the highest. And I hope that you can see through X, Y, and Z that I'm ready for the academic rigor of the program, whatever it might be. But yeah, generally, if you have a low GMAT, it's like, okay, well, hopefully you have a high GPA to kind of offset it. But that's, another part that you'll have to kind of figure out how you navigate. All right, the interview, right? Like, so let's say you got them to take the exception to the rule for you to get an interview. Or maybe they have a guaranteed interview, like Tuck. If you apply, I think it's like 10 to 13 or 15 days, 10 to 15 days before the deadline, typically there's a guaranteed interview. Kellogg generally interviews everybody who applies. It depends on volume, but let's say that you get that interview, or you're doing the McCombs application and you have to do the video interview first, right? And then you can opt into the other one. This is where you need to hook them, right? Like, this is my number one choice. In all of your responses, it needs to be reverent to that school. They need to feel that passion and excitement coming from you about their program, about what it is that they emulate that you want to be a part of. And then they want to know, again, like, are you qualified? Are you ready for an MBA? Have you had the professional experience to be able to compete at this level and to contribute at this level? So for the most part, like somebody going through okay, let me back up. Typically for an interview, you will have one of three interviewers. One is going to be an admissions committee member who typically may have your entire application. Some of them are still blind. So look at the debriefs, like on GMAT Club, and dive into that and see, who typically does it, and if it's a blind interview, or if they have clues to that in their actual website. Like sometimes they'll tell you it's going to be a blind interview. They only will have your resume or something like that. But sometimes an admissions committee may have your full application and your GMAT score, and they may ask about it, but not always, right? So you got to read the room on whether it's good to bring it up or not. And I'm happy to help with those one-off situations to be like, Jen, what do I do? Beyond that, if it's a student or alumni, they're not going to know your score. The school typically tries to keep that information private, and just for the student to know that you've passed the threshold to be able to be there for the interview. And now it's time for you, the interviewee, to be able to wow them and show them why this is the right fit for you. And that's their job is, would you want this person sitting next to you in a classroom? That's their biggest question. And you need to be able to answer that, or help them answer it, I guess. Okay, should you retake it? Whew, I know this creates a lot of anxiety for so many people. Now, I would say if you're doing deferred MBA admissions, yeah, you should try to retake it because you have so much time. And if we were doing this presentation in April or May, I'd say, yeah, retake it. If it's significantly lower, you can always aim for round 2, but it's only round 1 or round 2 for the most part, unless you're a domestic candidate, which means you're applying to an MBA program in your home country, then you should be okay. But especially the US, like they're really worried about visa processing. And so you want to apply in round 1 or 2, but you can put it off and delay to round 2. If you feel like you could gain some room on the GMAT or GRE. The other option is to flip the exams. So there are instances where people can do horrible on the GMAT, but do amazing on the GRE, or just even better. So this is like a little known secret, is that sometimes admissions committees can accept a wider range of GRE scores than they can with a GMAT score, because technically they're not ranked on GRE scores fully right now. They do report them, but they are not ranked on them. They're only ranked on GMAT scores. It's a little bit muddled right there, because like you'll never find Columbia publish like their average GRE score, or other schools. You'll never see it. European schools, you'll never see it. But they can take a wider range, right? So just kind of have that in mind. If you think you can improve, and especially like when you're worried about scholarship, that's another point for retaking. Scholarship is typically based on merit, and merit includes what company you're coming from, what role you've had, what school you come from, what GPA you have, and GMAT or GRE score. So these are the things that could pull up the ranking of the MBA program and therefore merit attention or scholarship. And so if you are on that cusp and you're like, I can apply to some lower schools where my GMAT score is, close to average or above average, or I can maybe take the exam one more time, and if I can get above average for them, then I get a higher ability for a scholarship. That's where you kind of waver and say like, okay, let's do this. I'll buckle down. I'll do it. So, if you didn't take help last time when you had your exam, I would get help this time. It's worth it. And you can find people with you can find people like local people that will tutor you for a lower rate, or you can go with a full-fledged, vendor who is going to give you a plan that's mapped out, right? You take what's going to best work with you and your budget for getting to that GMAT score or GRE score that you need. Okay, the other thing is there are a few schools that take the executive assessment. We haven't talked about that yet, but the executive assessment is GMAT Light. It's a 90-minute exam that's typically targeted towards the more executive MBA level, but NYU, Columbia, Darden, there's HEC Paris, accept the executive assessment. I think there's some more that I'm missing out on, but that's another alternative If you really feel like your GMAT GRE isn't making it, the executive assessment can be an option as well. So there are some alternatives out there. Some schools, especially your PNB schools, they have their own internal test. So you could always also consider opting for that, but it will be specific to that test and it won't help you with admissions to anywhere else. So, you can consider that as well. All right, FA. I understand that the admission teams know the average median scores for someone from my country. No need for me for loafer. Yes, you can assume that the schools have been educated on GMAT. Most of them go to a GMAT conference that was just in June in Kansas City, and they present all the new data and research for that, and they'll know about the different regions and what your typical GMAT GRE range is, or well, GMAT range, sorry. No, don't let me say GRE. They also know about GPAs, right? Like, so we work with a lot of candidates from India, and you have the CGPA system out of a 10, and they know that the class topper is not going to have a 9.9 or a 10 out of 10. They know it's rare. So the class topper could have an 8.9 out of 10, right? Like, they know and understand that too. Most schools from all over the world are in their database. The top feeder schools, right? Like the schools where they've had somebody come from and they know what that scale looks like. And so just know, like, they have a general understanding of different countries and their grading rubric, and that it isn't always as easy as getting a 4.0 in the US. So, yeah. All right. So things that we need to remember from today's conversation. It's a holistic process. They want to get to know all about you. Don't let your GMAT GRE score have a mental block on your readiness and your capability of getting into these MBA programs. It should not be something that makes you decide not to follow this dream. There are tons of MBA programs out there, and even if they're not an M7 or the top 5 on the Financial Times, there's still the quality that you're looking for. I would say top 30 MBA programs are still going to deliver and give you the opportunity for ROI. T15, absolutely. And then the STEM MBAs that have additional work time. I did a presentation a couple months ago about different schools that are non-US, and most of them are about 12 months on your visa post-grad, and they're a little bit more lax on what's required if you have to be employed, if you have to have employment that's in a specific area. There's some leeway. That's what I'm saying. It's like, don't just only consider one set of schools. Open your mind. If your GMAT is not getting where you need to be, don't take GMAT out, or don't take an MBA out of the picture completely. Talk with me. I'm happy to talk about it. Think about these strengths in all different parts of your life, your experience, that they're going to want to see. Think about how you can show your quantitative abilities, and absolutely show it in your resume. And so you want to be able to show them that you can quantify the impact you've had. And even if it's only on, like, sometimes you were part of a process, but you weren't part of the outcome. So you might not know what the final numbers were, but you know what you did in your zone. So that's what they're looking for. Again, like, you want to show this fit, and you do that by research, not just looking at the website, not just attending one of their webinars that are just how to apply. You want to go to student or alumni panel webinars or in person. You want to talk to some current students, and you want to have valuable conversations with them, not just like, hey, what do you like best about your MBA? Instead, you're going to connect with people who are quality contacts for you specifically. Maybe you want to go into marketing, so you contact somebody from the marketing side and marketing club, and you say, hey, I'm interested in pursuing marketing at Kellogg, and I want to hear about your experience or somebody else in the club if they came from a product background in tech. Very vague. But when you start narrowing in, then they can help answer more specifically and give you those quality answers that you need for your essay to say, when I spoke with so-and-so, I learned about this event and how it's pivotal in meeting local ad agencies or local companies or whatever it might be, right? So that's what you're going to do. And then obviously, like if you don't feel like you're ready to submit your application in round 1, think about round 2. You want to give them the best possible application, and that only happens if you are putting time into it. All right, there have been some questions. Oh, okay, so Afla says, ChatGPT said, I've heard that the average GMAT scores in India are quite high, so Indian applicants often need to score above the global average to stay competitive. Is that true? So I will say that we have worked with many Indian candidates, and we have seen them in different examples across the internet of people getting into top MBA programs from India that don't have a 750 or equivalent, right? So you can get into these MBA programs. I actually have several Indian females recently that got into Columbia with more of like a 700, 710 score, right? I think there is a little bit of like mental threshold, like to 700 or the new 645 that a lot of schools will hold on to. And I would say, you know, if you're below that, again, let's chat. But you don't have to have let's look. What's the equivalent of a 670 or a 765 is a 780, or no, 780 is a 685 now. You don't have to have the highest GMAT score to get in. It is helpful, again, for scholarship, but it is not the only way to get into a top MBA program. There's lots of ways. And a lot of it has to do with writing authentic applications and not just what you think the admissions committee wants to hear. Because all this fluff of like, I look forward to growing and being able to become a management consultant and to make an impact on business. What does that even say? Like, who are you? And then the difference is I'm really passionate about solving problems. And I've been able to do that historically time over time between this company, and this company. And now I want to take it to a new level and work in a management consulting firm where I get to go from one company to the next, solving problems on a daily basis and making an impact. Once I have that international global experience, I'll be able to move into my own company and make an impact, right? Like you want to give them something tangible that they can hold on to. Okay, let's see what else. So yeah, Amir. Oh, Amir, you're here. Nice to see you, Amir. All right. So Amir's, saying 10 to 20 points higher for him. We'll see. Do Indian candidates have to aim for a higher GMAT scores? Okay, we've already talked about that. No. Can I get into finance with Yale? Yes. People go into finance with Yale all the time. I would say look at their employment report, Google that. And then from there, you want to see where people are going in finance from that. And then, low GMAT, low GPA mitigation. Do I have to do HBX CORe? It's expensive with financial aid and any other option. So I think that you can do, again, you can do like a finance course, you can do an accounting course, calculus, those types of courses count as well. So you don't have to do HBX. And if you do it, if you do HBX, do it for a grade, which I know, again, is a little bit more expensive, but it is more impactful than having a pass-fail. You can do MBA Math. I'll tell you that a lot of MBA programs have their candidates or their new admits do MBA Math before they start the program. And it's passable by retaking it multiple times or maybe Googling the answer. So admissions committees know about that. But again, like, I think like that's a little bit more of like the, that could be towards like the waitlist assistance. But you could also like GMAT offers like some mini exams or preps courses in finance, accounting. Like they have those available and you can take those, and those are from GMAT with the GMAT. So it kind of gives it a little bit more credibility. If I submit an application around, say, August, by when do the adcoms review my application, do the background check, and respond with their decision? Okay, so most MBA programs are going to go on rounds, right? Like, and they're going to have deadlines to submit, and they typically will have a date that you will be notified by. So if it's for the September deadline, then they'll notify you by end of or mid-November for an interview. If you didn't get the interview, then you didn't get admitted. Admissions decisions will come out closer to December 15th or later. But if you're given an interview, they start trickling in usually mid to late September, October. It depends on the school. They can be a little bit later. So just don't get too freaked out if you see a lot of people getting interviews for other schools. Some schools are behind. Like Wharton just published their application last week, which is insane. It's so late. It was crazy. It was like, what are the essays? And they're different. So anyways, so that's kind of the timeline. If you do early admissions or oh my gosh, there's an early admissions process. Like if you're interested in that specific school, Darden, Duke, I think are the first ones that are the only ones I remember doing it right now. But if you apply for early action, then they tend to give you your interview and decision on a much more accelerated path before maybe you would even know if you got an interview with another school. But those deadlines are typically in August. So depends on that. Okay, so just remember that a GMAT score is not the only thing that's going to get you into an MBA program at all. The GMAT is only one of the many factors and can only weigh, sometimes 25 to 35%, right? So it's not the majority of what's considered. And again, your application is going to be reviewed. The admissions committees that are in office right now, like they're not throwing out applications, especially the U.S. schools, because they're going to have lower applications this year. And so they're going to be looking at each one of them with potential. So again, this is the way they're going to be able to do this, by exceptional work, strong academics, making sure that you have a unique point of view. And then you want to write those essays so that they make sense to the school. And you can also look at some other options for testing. Okay, so I'm Jen with ARINGO, and we're an MBA admissions consulting firm. So if you have any questions or concerns about your MBA profile, want help with learning how to best craft your application, assistance going through that process, that's what we're here to do. You can always email me or sign up for a profile evaluation. Whatever you need, I'm here to help. Yeah, so that's everything for today. I don't know that we have any more questions. So if you want my contact information, make sure to screenshot it right now so it doesn't disappear. Afla says, are online certificates relevant to your course? Does that help your admissions like Coursera or Udemy? They can help. Again, they're going to look at how hard they are and how easy it is to pass. So if you're actually doing a course and enrolling in a course, they can see the continued work and like the work that you're putting in, the dedication to it, and then hopefully having a strong grade. Now that's the other thing, is usually they're going to want a grade. Like Duke or Duke Fuqua, they will say like specifically, like, we want you to take one of these 3 classes and you have to have an A or above, and they have to be from a traditional school. So Udemy or Coursera might not work. I understand their internal timelines and how do they go? Okay, so you're asking, I want to understand response deadlines. I want to understand their internal timelines, how they go about evaluating the application, and do early submissions actually make a difference? For the most part, no. If, the most of the time they are going to review after the deadline, because they're going to, you don't get an advantage of submitting your application a month in advance. I wish you did. Columbia used to do this. Columbia does it for their day term, but they don't do it anymore. But they used to invite people for interview on a continuous basis. Kellogg, maybe that one, like, be the exception to that, because they try to interview as many people as possible. Tuck, again, if you submit your application 10, 15 days ahead of time, then you're likely to get, or you're guaranteed an interview. Look at their website for specifics. Beyond that, most of the time they're going to schools will roll out their interview invites all at the same time, or very close to after the deadline. Very few will roll them out before that. All right. Any other questions that I can help answer? Other than that, thanks so much for joining us. Again, like and share this presentation or on the YouTube, and share with your friends, and hopefully everybody learns a little something new. If you were reviewing a particular candidate and their HBX CORe grade is pass with high honors, how would you interpret this candidate in terms of that you're ready? Like for quant basis, you're ready for the MBA program. If you pass HBX with honors, HBX CORe, then they would think that you're ready. You can handle it. So that's the great thing, is that's like the proof in the pudding of that. If you were giving the opportunity to have like a long study and exam, that you're going to be able to do that. How much is the US scenario going to affect admissions? Yep. So I'm assuming that applications to European UK schools are going to go up quite a bit. So consider that in your application process. Beyond that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. It was nice to meet you, and we'll see you around GMAT Club. Bye.